welcome everybody and good evening. My name is Karen Ellis and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at South Gippsland Shire Council. So welcome, we're absolutely delighted to have you with us this evening. I'd like to start this evening with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the Bunurong and Gunai people as the traditional custodians of South Gippsland and pay respects to their elders, past, present and future, for they hold the memories, traditions, culture and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Australia. I'd also like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of all the lands from which we're meeting today, noting that as we're online, we've probably got participants from a number of different areas. I'd also very much like to welcome our panellists and all of our guests for this evening. I'll give a personal welcome to our panellists in a moment, but first of all, I'd like to welcome and introduce Deborah Wu from the Victorian Local Governance Association, who is our host this evening. Deborah will kick us off with some housekeeping and also help us to get to know each other a bit to start off with. Over to you, Deborah.
Thank you everyone for coming along tonight. We are very excited to be doing this and to be working with all of you in South Gippsland as you return to elections. I'm seeing some of you popping the traditional owners of the country that you're coming from in the chat. And if you haven't done so yet, go ahead and do that. I'm also about to share my screen. So let me know if you can see that, because it's always a bit funny when you've got two screens going on. Can you see something that says, how are you feeling right now? Great. Well, if you can pull out your second device, if you've got one in front of you, if not, just pop your answer in the chat. But our aim here is to create a bit of a word cloud that says, how are you feeling right now? The other tool that we'll be using, as well as Mentimeter, is the Zoom breakout rooms. So at around 6:10, we'll have a short break and you can stretch your legs and grab a cuppa. And then when you get back, we'll split all of you into groups for a small group discussion. You'll have 10 minutes to have a chat and then we'll come back to ask you questions of the panel. So with that, it's great to see all your responses there. We've got interested, excited, optimistic, hopeful. I'm reading the positive ones first, but I think that all of us do feel to some extent that depleted, tired, run down sort of feeling. But hopefully we can energize you a little bit tonight. And by the time you leave today, we'll be seeing some different results. But what we're going to do now is flick to the next bit, which is your name and where you're from. So I will give you a few minutes to pop your name in, and I'll read them out as they come. So it should have switched over to that for you on your device as well. But even just from the country in the chat, we can see people coming from Dja Dja Wurrung country, from Gunai Kurnai, lots of Gunai Kurnai, which is good given that we're in South Gippsland, Dja Dja Wurrung and Taungurung, and from East Gippsland as well. We've got Claire Williams from Leongatha, Tony from Bendigo, Margaret O'Rourke from Bendigo, Meg Edwards from Fish Creek, Karen from South Gippsland, Mendy Yuri from Eagle Point, Anda Banakos from Gunai Kurnai country, Sue from Tura, Susan Lloyd from Waratah Bay, Korumburra. Denise is coming from Wurundjeri Wurrung country and Whitehorse, and thanks Denise for coming along. She's one of our board members, Councillor Denise Massoud. Lucy Roffey is coming from Maryborough, Shelley Banders from South Gippsland, AJ from South Gippsland, Jess from North Melbourne, a Gippsland Heart. I'm in North Melbourne as well, so hello Jess. And we've got Katie Kinden from the city of Whittlesea. And also from Ngunnawal country, and Jadzini. So thanks for joining us all the way from Canberra. What I will do now, it's been great to see all of your responses, is I will hand back to Karen so that she can introduce our panelists and we can get started.
Thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. It's terrific to see the diversity of people in our virtual room tonight. So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our panel members along tonight. And panel members, if you wouldn't mind just giving our attendees a little bit of a wave when I introduce you. So first up, we've got Councillor Mendy Yuri, who is the Mayor at East Gippsland Shire Council. Welcome, Mendy. Thank you for joining us tonight. We've got Councillor Margaret O'Rourke, who is a councillor at the City of Greater Bendigo and also a former mayor at the City of Greater Bendigo. Welcome, Marg. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone.
And we've also got Lucy Roffey, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Central Goldfields Shire Council. Welcome, Lucy.
Hi, thanks, Karen.
Thanks so much to all of our panellists for joining us tonight. I'd like to start this evening by asking each of our panellists to take a moment to tell us a little bit about your journey into local government, and in particular, what attracted you in the various roles that you're in, and what interested you about spending some time in contributing to local government. Mendy, we might start with you.
How long have we got, Karen?
Not long. You may take 2 minutes.
Okay. All right. Look, for me, it was a part of a personal journey, I think, and it all happened when I was about 50. And I started on a spiritual journey. Then the children had sort of grown up and were a bit independent, and so it was sort of time for me to look at what I wanted to do next. So it was about a 9-year spiritual journey, and part of that was looking at myself, I guess, and what I was doing and how I wanted to live my life and what I felt responsible for or could do. You know, I was looking at that agency. How much agency do I have to change the world and make the world a better place? And I sort of thought that, well, going on to council might be one thing I could do. So I stood and was elected and was there for 2 terms. I was the mayor for 3 terms. And that went until 2012, and then I took time out and did some study. I'd never studied at tertiary level before. I was a nurse, but did that when it was a hospital-based course. So I really enjoyed the study, ended up doing an MBA and Master of Strategic Foresight, so I became a futurist. I also did a 12-month facilitation course, so I became passionate about groups of people and what could be I don't know, the sorts of decision making that a functional group of human beings can come up with. I'm became fascinated about that. And then I thought, well, where am I going to go next? Where can I apply this stuff? And I thought, well, it's back on council in local government. So I stood again, was just elected at the end of last year, and the mayor for 12 months. So I feel like, even though I find it incredibly challenging and difficult at times, I feel like I'm in the place that I really should be. So I'm very happy to be here.
Great. Thanks so much, Mendy. No better place to apply your learning.
Yeah.
Marg, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Thanks, Mendy. That was fantastic to hear your background in a very succinct, short time, so I'll do my best. I had a long career in telecommunications with Telstra and left in 2010 and started my own consulting business. So I'd worked in rural and regional communities all my working career. And 2016, we had a lot of unrest in Greater Bendigo around a planning matter. And you could see that our city was really becoming impacted by that, the brand of our city for our businesses and our community. And I am a person that when I get a level of dissatisfaction, I get a bit of fire in my belly, and I don't sit on the fence and throw stones. I actually very often want to get involved and engaged and try and help with the solution. So after talking to a number of people, I just thought we've got to get some good people to stand for council because we're at risk, and threw my hat in the ring and thought if I don't get in, at least I've had a go, and I hope that I've inspired other people. And I was elected, and then a week later I was elected mayor. None of that was part of my life journey, I can tell you. Local government was never part of my life journey. And I was mayor for 4 years and chair of regional cities for 3 years, and then re-elected this term. I'm no longer mayor, and but very, very pleased to be part of council. And I think we're kicking goals, and it's been a real eye-opener for me. I've learnt lots, and I think I was fortunate that my career that I'd had helped me in this role, but it's very much about how does the community come together to solve problems and not create them. And that's where I've really learnt lots and thoroughly enjoy what I'm doing. And I'm really pleased to be here tonight to be able to share that story.
Thanks so much, Marg. It's fantastic. Lucy, over to you.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I think everybody in local government's got really interesting and diverse backgrounds, and I think it sort of matches the fact that local government is a very diverse delivery of services and supporters of community. I had a commercial background. I started as a chartered accountant and worked in commercial organisations and moved into the film industry for a while, and probably took my step into the public service when I worked for the Australian Centre for the Moving Image, which is at Federation Square, and was very involved in the redevelopment of ACME. And so firstly, I think I just really loved, you know, putting my efforts to things that the community would appreciate, as opposed to working for commercial organisations that were for profit. So it was the not-for-profit side of working for ACME that I really enjoyed. And my husband and I had lived in Canada for 3 years prior to that, a little side tour in my career as well. And I'd run a commercial luxury spa while I was over there. And we lived in a small community. So when we came back to Australia and I'd finished the role at ACME, I moved up to Castlemaine into the country. I wanted to be back in a small community, and I looked to, you know, the types of work that I could do, and came across local government as a career at that point. So that was probably about 11, 12 years ago now. And I worked for quite a long time in a director corporate role with Mount Alexander Shire, and the last 3 years I've been with Central Goldfields Shire as the CEO. And the reason I've stayed in local government, so that was, you know, a bit of a leap of faith for me to take on one of the roles, is probably, you know, what we're hearing here is it is so great to be able to deliver programs and projects and services for the community, and the way that we work so closely with the community, that sort of grassroots part of government is fantastic. And every day, you know, you might have your tough days and some things are difficult and not always appreciated for some of the work that we're doing, but mostly delivering projects that touch everybody across the community, whether it's, you know, early years or young people or, you know, the aging population with our home and community care services. There's just so many services that we deliver, and I love it. And every day is different. And every day we feel like we're actually doing something that helps people enjoy their life and where they live, and you know, make a difference. So that's my story and background in local government.
Thanks so much, Lucy. It's definitely true that every day is different, which is some really exciting part of the role. So, facilitator's pleasure, I'm going to kick us off now with a couple of questions just to get things going. And this one's an open one to any member of the panel that would like to answer. In your experience, what do you think is the importance of having diversity at the table in a council environment?
So I was actually just reflecting on that earlier before we were having our pre-conversation about working on the council plan and having a whole range of councillors that have got different backgrounds and experience, and the different views that they can bring to a decision. It's also the same when you're doing community consultation, having a range of people from different ages and backgrounds and stages in life adding to the decision making means you end up with the best possible outcome. And, you know, it is difficult, obviously, to negotiate that because you're not always perhaps in agreement on certain matters. But as you work through it, having all those different views and the different experience means that you're making really well-informed decisions, and that you're considering all the different issues that might come up, as I said, for people from a different background, or if someone's got a disability, so that you end up with the best possible decision for the community as a whole.
Thanks, Lucy. That's terrific. Mendy or Marg, would you like to add to that?
I think you've covered that really well, Lucy. It's really interesting. You need to have those different voices around the table, different age groups, genders. Our community come to us in different ways. You know, there are cohorts of the community that don't talk to me about things, but will talk to another councillor, and vice versa. And so, as you say, when you're actually building the community plan, you just want as many voices as you can have in that process. And, you know, the deliberative engagement process we've just been through recently with building our 10-year vision and having 15,000 invitations go out to the community, and we end up with 41 people in a room, and I knew 4 of them. And you look at that and like, we all think we know so many in our community, but it's getting those diverse voices is really important. And yes, it is a skill to be able to bring that all together collectively in a way. Often council decisions, you know, well, after a debate, you sort of sit there and go, you know what, I reckon that's right, because it's what our community, it's reflective of our community. You know, it's not always straightforward, and that voice just comes through in so many different ways. So Very important.
Yes, I think if you haven't got diversity at the table, you have to go and look for it because you haven't got the right people in the room. And I think this has been a mindset, you know, over the last, I don't know, 10 years or maybe more, you know, it's been a slow transition. The traditional way was to have, you know, all men and all, you know, leaders in the community who knew everything, you know, knew what was best for everything. And to move is quite a challenge. And it does take a lot more work to, you know, hear everybody's different views and to work it into something that, you know, is going to take us forward. That it's really tricky and requires a lot of skill. But I think we're practicing, and I'm always really pleased that we have the leadership at the state level, you know, that in our new act, I think there are things there which make us go down that path. And yeah, challenging, but really good work.
Thanks so much to all of you. That was a terrific start to our evening. Next question now that I'm going to ask first to Lucy, but I would absolutely love Marg and Mendy to add any thoughts you might have from your experience. So by way of context for our members here tonight, Lucy's the CEO of Central Goldfields Shire Council, who also had a council dismissed perhaps 6 years or so ago now, Lucy, and at the most recent elections, which were October last year, was the first election where councillors were returned after that period of administration. So given that that's a very similar context to South Gippsland, I'd be really interested if Lucy might just share a bit of experience in terms of coming back to councillors after a period of administration, and in particular, talk to us a bit about the process that the community and then the new councillors went through.
Most certainly what we're doing tonight was a big part of it, was doing some information sessions so that, that we could get a really good breadth of candidates for the election. There was also the Leading Excellence Maryborough program was run for a couple of years as well to get some more people into community leadership. And, you know, that hasn't necessarily resulted in more people putting up their hands for council, but it most certainly has, you know, added to the community leadership across the whole Shire in a whole range of different roles. So some on board, some have actually put their hand up for council. So that was a really important part of it as well. The election itself, I think it was actually, you know, was well contested. It was during COVID, so it was really difficult for the candidates to get out and talk to people and meet people, and particularly some of the newer people that wanted to put their hands up. I think that was a challenge for them. And we ended up after the election with 3 of the councillors from the previous council that had been dismissed came back onto council. We had a councillor who'd had an experience working in a metro council, and then we had 3 completely new councillors. And it's been a great mix. A bit of new, a bit of old experience. We've got good gender balance. We've got actually quite a good diversity in terms of age as well. No really young people. We always like that, but I think that's a bit tough in some of the rural areas. But it's going really well. And I think probably one of the biggest challenges, though, for that group and for the executive and the organisation, if anything, is just the continuity. So we will often, you know, be briefing on a certain item and we forget that perhaps we need to give a bit more background and history to the issue. Take for granted that, you know, councillors might have been during those 3 years paying attention to everything that was going on. Of course they weren't, you know, not necessarily even thinking of running for council. So we have to slow down a little bit and make sure that we do more in-depth briefing on matters. But there's lots of councils that haven't been in administration and end up with quite a lot of new councillors anyway. So it's actually not necessarily a completely different scenario to a normal election where you might get a whole, you know, big turnover of councillors. So for any new council, it is really tricky to get the balance of how much to brief on history and how much to just focus on the future, and also all the learning as well in terms of, I don't know, technical things like planning and finance, etc. So we had a fairly flexible induction program so that we could tailor that to the needs of that particular group. And often what you do is you tailor that training to decisions that are coming up. So if you know there's a big planning decision coming up, you might actually focus on that initially and then do some of the other training later on. So you have to be fairly flexible. But we've provided a lot of support, a lot of training to the new councillors, whether they were new or old ones coming back in to make sure that they were ready to make the decisions they needed to as a new council.
Thanks, Lucy. That's really interesting, and it's great to hear about hear from someone that's gone through the experience that will obviously be kicking off later this year. I wondered if Mendy or Marg, as councillors, had any sort of advice or reflections that you would share in terms of welcoming a new council where there's been a period where effectively there hasn't been that local community representation?
Look, I'm happy to share, because obviously Bendigo being a neighbouring council to Central Goldfields, we were really mindful of the support that we needed to give and share to Lucy, particularly when she was elected into that role. And I know our CEO, Craig Neiman, is very much like that with many of the other councils. In fact, he does a mentoring role for a number of CEOs. So it was just ensuring, I suppose, that the opportunity was there. And Lucy, you could probably speak back to this a little bit too, and how important it is to have that support from neighbouring councils as well. And I think the thing that is most concerning always when a council is dismissed, that it actually does impact on all our councils ultimately, because, you know, for a period of time in the media, for whatever reason, you know, when the media sort of take their angle, it's sort of a little bit of that sort of hits back onto other councils as well, right, wrong or otherwise. And so it does just take a little bit of time, and it's just that democracy gets thrown up in the air a bit. And to hear the results that came out of the election for Central Goldfields, I was really pleased when you mentioned the mix, you know, democracy in action, and it was great to see the new ones that came back and a few of the old, but, you know, just having that good diversity around the table. But yeah, it's a challenging thing, and in some ways exciting too, because you have the ability to put into place some things that will set the new council up as well, Lucy, I would think.
Mendy, you're obviously a little bit more local to South Gippsland. Do you have any observations or comments for our participants tonight?
Not really, Karen. I don't have any direct experience that we're speaking about, but I just take note, Lucy. It sounds fantastic that you're able to tailor, you know, the training and the induction to whatever, you know, skills and experience you have in front of you. I think that's really important for any group of councillors. I'm happy that it's worked out so well for you, and really appreciate that.
Can I just mention one other thing, Karen? I'm just sort of listening to Marg and Mendy were saying as well. And the bit that I missed that's pretty important is then having elected representatives back, and their connections into and their reach in the community has been fantastic for us as an organisation. So it was hard work having only 3 administrators trying to cover the whole shire and not having all those connections. And then we also had a bit of change in the organisation as well. So we've really loved actually having all the councillors back again and being able to have more arms and legs and ears out there, listening to the community and bringing that information back into the decision-making process.
Yeah, it's such an important point, isn't it? It's such a great local asset to have all those local members of the community that's so well connected. I think we've got a minute now for perhaps another question from me, which I'm enjoying. So that's good, Deborah. Thank you. I just wondered whether or not, particularly probably Mendy and Marg, but I'm sure you'll have some observations too, Lucy, about whether or not you think that there is any unique leadership attributes that women bring to the council table that really round out that leadership group, I suppose. Do you have any observations or reflections about the particular skills that women bring to the council table?
It's not apparent to me. I don't know that we can claim a whole set of, you know, approaches or values or insights. There are sort of traditional ones, you know, people of my age, you know, 67-ish. I grew up in a very traditional family. So, you know, the skills that I developed looked like a certain thing. But I think that was just the family that I grew up in. I don't think there's anything that means that I have to stick to those things as I grow and develop, hopefully, as a human being. I don't think so. But look, I noticed it the other day. We're in an audit and risk committee, and it happens in East Gippsland that our audit and risk committee is all male at the moment. Unfortunately, we did have a woman who stood at the last, and she was appointed but then had to leave for other reasons. So we've just been doing our 12-month assessment of that committee to see how effective it is and what needs to change. And obviously the gender issue came up. And one of our current councillors, bless his heart, because he's a gem, but he's a bit rusty in his thinking, in my particular view. He thought that there was a risk in trying to rebalance the gender on that committee, in bringing women in just to try and rebalance the gender thing. And so he hasn't obviously caught up with all the research that says, well, actually, if you've got a gender diverse group of people, you get better results. I don't know, that must have sort of bypassed him. So that's just an example, I think, of, that old thinking that is still around. And it goes back to my saying, if you haven't got diversity, you need to go and look for it, because you won't be achieving your best results unless you've got it. So diversity, yes, but I'm not sure about particular qualities that women
attributes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mendy. Marg, any thoughts?
Look, I would agree with Mendy there. I actually don't think there's any particular skill that women, like there's not anything I could really just say, look, this is what you'll get. I just think it just brings a diversity of thinking. That's all. Like if you do have a room of all men or one female and all men, I just think that lens of lots of different ways of looking at a situation just doesn't get its fullness, just doesn't get its full discussion of what would be there if there isn't that diversity, in my view. So,
Lucy, any thoughts that you wanted to add?
I think I have to agree with both of those. You've got to go and look sometimes. We have this argument about should you have quotas and or not have quotas, and I'm a big supporter of quotas, mainly because it makes you think about doing things differently. So that's about, there is talent out there, you're just not looking for it in the right places. And if you've got mainly men looking for the talent, they're not going to find women because they don't know where to look. So, equally, when you've got the balance at the table, you're getting, a different set of eyes looking at any problem and thinking about how a decision might impact a whole range of people, not just your own gender. And you can't do that easily if you haven't lived the experience. So, we've just been doing a project recently and talking about safety and where women and girls and gender diverse people feel unsafe. And a lot of male counsellors and they wouldn't know what that felt like because they've never felt unsafe. So it wouldn't have been a project that necessarily would have been supported without the balance at the table, because it wouldn't have been seen as a problem because they haven't had the lived experience. So it's just that basic lived experience as a woman that men can't put the hat on, therefore they can't make decisions around it. And it's probably why we also need other, diversity as well, not just gender diversity. So people with disability or people with an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background, because we haven't got the lived experience to make decisions for those people.
That last point is really important. And, I worry for the people in our community who don't identify as either male or female, because we so often still count. We've got this many women and this many men, and we don't, so I know we're progressing but it's slow, and I just notice it in our language a lot these days.
Thanks so much for our panellists. I hope for all our participants that's really warmed us up for you to start thinking about the questions that you'd like to ask. So on that note, I'll hand back over to Deborah. Please start getting the creative juices thinking, participants, and you'll have the opportunity to put your questions to the panellists shortly. Over to you, Deborah.
Thanks, Karen. So we are running ahead of schedule. I know that's very amazing. You're just very efficient in your facilitating, Karen. But that means that our short break will start a little bit earlier than I have on my run sheet. So if everyone wants to come back at 6:15, just grab a cup of tea or whatever else you might want to do. And when you come back, you'll all be placed in breakout groups to discuss your thoughts and any questions that you have for the panel. So we'll put you in relatively small groups, maybe sort of 5 or 6. And then someone should take note of the top 2 questions and write them down. And after we come back from the breakout groups, we'll get you to share the questions that you came up with in the chat box. When you come back, you should have a pop-up on your screen telling you that you've been invited to a breakout room. I'll just form those randomly. If you accept the invitation, then you should be able to see and hear the other people in your group. And if you've had your camera off up until now, this is the time to turn it on when you get back. So with that, we'll see you all back here at 6:15.
Yeah, you do need a thick skin. So, you know, be ready for that. Have your armour on, because everyone's got an opinion and you can't please everyone. So I think if you go in with that mindset, knowing that you can't please everyone, but do the best that you can, it does get a bit personal, and obviously you need some mechanisms, some good support people around you to help you deal with that. In terms of dealing with poor behaviour, I mean, there's a number of ways. When elected, you work through a code of conduct with the council as well in that process. And I think also, like for us in Bendigo, we've got rules of engagement as part of that too. So, you know, we've workshopped with an independent facilitator to have some values and rules that we want to work by as well. But the code of conduct has also been tailored, you know, from the templated one. We've done our own from that.
Terrific, Marg. I would agree with you that you do need a thick skin, or perhaps more to be sure about where you're coming from and why you're doing this. And I started off this term by actually writing that down so I could remind myself because I thought this is going to be, you know, a bit of a tough period, I reckon. You know, and that's a reflection on, you know, who we've got around the table, but it's also a reflection of the time that we're going through. Like, people are under such stress, my goodness. And so it's helped me to be able to go back to that, to just remind myself about why I'm doing it. I've also got a folder called the pink file to open for emergency use only. And so far it's got one letter of thanks in it, telling me how wonderful I am. It's only one letter, but I can just open that when I need to. Yeah, so I think that stability in yourself, just being sure about why you're there, is important. Of course, yes, Marg, we've got the code of conduct and we've needed to, you know, refer back to that a number of times. I gather that bad behaviour in councils is not uncommon, you know, when I speak to other councillors, and it's something the Minister for Local Government is, you know, trying to address through different ways. So, yeah, I think we need to, unfortunately, expect a little bit of that and just be ready to deal with it as best we can.
It's very true, and I think that's great, Mendy, with the folder, with the letter that you've got in there, because the good far outweighs the bad. Like, we've, you know, and Mendy, you would have had it from your previous terms in council. There are some really torrid times when you're right in the moment, but, you know, the good really outweighs that negative, and I think that's what you've got to always remind yourself and lift yourself up a little bit out of that. And yeah, that support around you is really helpful. But yeah, there's so many more good moments than there is negative moments, in my view.
Lucy, anything that you wanted to add, particularly in terms of practices or processes that can assist to deal with poor behaviour?
Yeah, because there's two different bits of poor behaviour we're talking about. Some are perhaps between councillors, there's maybe a bit of concern about that, and some of it is actually community members and perhaps how they might treat you. The Mayor now has a much stronger role to play in terms of upholding the code of conduct and councillor behaviours, and I've seen that as been a real positive move from the changes to the Local Government Act. There's just more mechanisms in place so that conversations can be had. The code of conduct sets out processes as well if things can't be worked out between councillors, so that there are mechanisms for mediating and those sorts of things. I mean, hopefully you don't have to use them, but they are there, and they're probably more robust than they've been in the past. And then with the community, some of the heat that might come with the community, I think sort of probably one of the areas that can be toughest is probably social media, and understanding what you can do to, you know, block people, remove comments. There's a lot of mechanisms you can use just so that you don't even see or hear some of the negativity. If that happens, if you're in a really sort of hot situation, it doesn't happen often, I also think the law's starting to change in that regard, and there is actually probably more legal avenues to deal with any behaviour from community that might be aggressive, threatening or rude, getting to that level, which is sort of threatening. So that can help as well. But I want to paint the better picture, because I think Mark's right. Most of it, you don't ever get to that point. Most of it's, great news stories, and people are generally pretty respectful and nice, but there are things that you can, mechanisms and legal avenues that you can take if things are unpleasant.
Thanks, Lucy. That's really good to hear. And I agree that the good does outweigh the bad, although, of course, in every job you do have some bad days. This is a really good question. And Marg, you mentioned before that you were part of a council that came back in after a difficult period. So you might like to go first with this one. The question is, how does the next council rebuild trust with the community?
Really good question. I think one of the first steps for us as a council going in, so when we got re-elected in 2016, there were 7 new councillors out of 9, so only 2 were returned. So it was a pretty clear message that the community were not happy. And Karen, you were around in those times. You were one of our directors. And the new council, I think, did a lot of work, and we were supported well by council officers in this, that we did have an independent facilitator that came in with us, and we had a full week of induction back in when you could actually have face-to-face activities. But when we nominated, everyone that nominated, irrespective, because we didn't know if we were going to get in, it went into your calendar that you, from the day we were declaring the polls, for 4 days straight, we did induction together with executives, and we actually fortunately had 2 new executives. They'd only been there a short time, so they were in around the table doing the induction. And I think having that face-to-face, those face-to-face sessions was really good. It built team's not the right word, because it's a team to a sense, but we've all got different platforms. But I just think it brought things together when it came to the election of the mayor, because of what was going on in our community, and our community were broken. And it took I think it took a couple of years really for our community to rise up out of all of that went on, because we had conduct panels, we had a lot of things that were going on that was really poor behaviour, and it was important to have a fresh face. So although both of the returning councillors wanted to be mayor, and one in particular, it was really, I think that was one part of the journey for us to build the trust, was the fresh face and some different ways of connecting with councillors. We tried some different ways of engagement that had been not done before. So there was just a real fresh approach. So I suppose it was just drawing a line in the sand and moving forward.
You've obviously been through this on the CEO side of the fence, Lucy, in terms of having a council come back post administrators. How did your councillors go about rebuilding that trust with the community?
I think, actions really, demonstrate to the community how you want to proceed. So the actions of the councillors from day one have been really positive. And they've been really clear about the things they want to achieve for the community. They've been out and about, meeting with them. So we did lots and lots of listening posts so that they could be out there and talking about the things that they wanted to achieve. So I think, actions speak 1,000 words, and the trust is starting to build. I think part of it is also, delivering on what we say we're going to do. So setting a really achievable agenda as well, so that there's that trust that's built up again. And probably the last thing is just, it's that transparency around decision making. That the thing where you lose trust is if people think decisions are being made behind closed doors. So the council meeting itself is a really great opportunity to explain decisions. So not just to quickly sort of go through the motions and make the decision, but for councillors to speak about why they're making a decision and what's going on, so that everyone can understand how decisions are being made, I think is really important as well. So it's that transparency around decision making is really, really important.
This might be a good question for you, Mendy, in terms of your campaign this time last year. There's a really good question in here about if people are considering running for council, how do they build connection with the community and help people understand what you stand for as a candidate in a COVID environment? And how do you deal with the limited opportunities to meet with people in person?
It is a very good question, Karen. not sure that I'm getting very good at the best person to answer, because I'd already been on council, so I had a profile already. I felt like that gave me a huge advantage. But just reflecting on other councillors who stood and were successful, and particularly our youngest councillor who was elected, who I think is only 24 or something, like she's quite young. She used obviously social media a lot and IT stuff. So she made videos of herself and posted them online, and she used networks as much as possible to get those out to people. I think that was a bit of a winning strategy to use. But however you can get your face in front of people, I think you have to, you just have to do that. The less we can do it in person, the more it has to be virtual, but whichever way you can, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Mendy. Marg, what about your experience this time last year?
Yeah, look, I think, again, because I've been on council, and when you're there, they either love you or hate you. So it was because you're in the media a lot, so that your profile is there. But for new councillors, a bit similar to Mendy's comments around it. We've got a young councillor, he's 23, very tech savvy, made lots of videos and social media, and just being in with good networks. Like, he was just, networked really well. And I think your supporters have got to do a fair bit of the work for you, the heavy lifting a bit with the COVID restrictions, to be honest, because they're going to get the word out for you. We were able to letterbox because our restrictions being regional wasn't like Melbourne. So we were able to letterbox if that was what people wanted to do. It's really, it was more a social media pathway for new people that hadn't stood before, to be honest. A couple of older members who don't use social media, just, putting their core flutes up. There was, you still get back to that sort of old-fashioned campaigning of core flutes going up. There was quite a bit of that from the older ones that weren't actually into social media, and flyers. Yeah.
If you were advising someone that was thinking about running for council, and this is probably a good question for Lucy as well as for Marg and Mendy, how many hours per week would you suggest people need to dedicate to their role as a councillor?
I seriously do believe it's about 20 hours. So I know in our last term that would be the average that councillors put in. Some actually put in more because they were in a position where they could, because their work, they were retired. It's really difficult for young people, but we have a briefing, and every council does it differently, but we have a briefing on a Monday. It runs from 12 o'clock till about 5:30. We used to do it in the evenings, but we felt that wasn't the best outcome for executives who are there all day and then going well late into the evening. But that's to do everything that you do before a council meeting, obviously, and then you've got your reading. And there's some weeks where we had a council meeting the other night, 370 pages, plus there was a heap of attachments. We have a lot of reading to do, and it's making the time to do that, I suppose. So you have to be realistic about this. It's just not a role that you can get in and run with, because it will wear you down very quickly. You have to be prepared, and you do need to set time away. And I would say for us in Greater Bendigo, it's fair to say it's probably about 20 hours for a councillor a week.
Mendy, what's your experience?
I reckon probably similar. And we have a few councillors who are passionate about the work and would really love to do more, and it's always a tension for them. I feel really sorry for them, because it's such great work when you get into it. You could do a lot more than you're able to. This is such an issue for young people, particularly, who are often juggling a number of roles, and people trying to work full time. And perhaps with family as well. I don't know how they do it. I'd be frustrated to death about doing it. So I don't know. My own style is to these days is to try and do one job, and I think it's a really, it's a total gift if you can only do one job in your life, and I'm really enjoying that now. But look, 20 hours is not unreasonable.
So Karen, I'd just also preface that I think that's pre-COVID too, because I do think we've got a lot of Zoom meetings now, Teams meetings, because we can't meet face to face. When you're back in an environment, and that's where the whole 20 hours comes in, because it's about going to events, going out and meeting with people and so on. And so it's probably lessened a bit because of COVID, because we're able to meet online, and the community aren't doing things because they can't. So, you know, there's almost a bit of freedom for a counsellor when we're in a restriction environment, but when you're not in restrictions, it's pretty full on because you get lots of invitations to things all the time.
Lucy, what's your experience?
Well, I have to say, very similar that, you know, there's the weekly briefings to provide information for councillors when they're coming into decision making, or just to update councillors on the, you know, project plans for all the projects that we're involved in. But I think one thing that, you know, councillors can rely on is the level of expertise that's provided from staff and consultants. And when you're given a report that's, you know, a couple of 100 pages, do you need to read the whole report, or is the executive summary going to be adequate for the decision that you're making? So I think sometimes, you know, just even that managing your time and thinking sensibly about what you really need to get into and what you need to know in detail, and what actually the executive summary and relying on the recommendation of the officers can really help you manage your time. I think as a CEO, I'm very mindful of the time of my councillors, and I try not to schedule too many things in a row or too many things on top of each other. You know, if you've got a good group of councillors, you can share the load as well. So I know with our mayor actually gets some of the other councillors to go to things so that he doesn't go to everything. And that's not necessarily just to share the load, but to get everyone else sort of equally have a profile out in the community. So there's lots of things you can do to sort of make it manageable, but it is a lot of, you know, I don't underestimate the amount of work to kind of get up to speed with council businesses, to understand some of the more complex areas like planning or the finances. And there is a bit of reading that's involved in doing that, no matter what size the council.
Another question in the chat. In the induction, will there be a position outline for the role of councillors and the limits of the scope of the role? What's been, for any one of the three of you, what's been your experience in terms of that element of the induction program?
Definitely very strong. Yes, there will be in the induction, and it's necessary. You need to have an understanding of what the role includes and what it doesn't include. You know, that's incredibly important.
How much interaction is there, and how much access is there between councillors and staff?
Yeah, I saw that one in there. I thought that might be a good one to follow on from that last question about the role of councillors. Yeah. So the Local Government Act's pretty clear, firstly, just about the role of councillors and the role of the CEO, and that the CEO manages the operations of the organisation, and the councillors are really setting the direction and the strategic direction of council. There's sometimes that concern about how much contact with staff. Well, we've talked about briefings. So, you know, at a briefing, the executive are always there, and there may be managers or officers that are presenting reports that come in and brief. But one of the reasons why often there are sometimes rules around interactions with staff, and this is always a tricky one to understand, and you won't really understand it until you're a councillor. Often you can't even understand it when you are a councillor, but there is a power dynamic. So if you are a councillor and you are that important person sitting there making all of the decisions, if you approach a junior officer about a matter, you might be just asking a question and they will take it as a direction. So that's where it's difficult. And this happens in organisations too. If your board of directors walk into an office and they actually ask a question of a staff member, the staff member will take that as a you know, direction and go off and do something. And so that's where it's quite difficult. They just feel, well, if the council has said that to me, I better go off and do it right now. And so off they go. And actually the councillor may not have been issuing a direction, but that's how people respond because of hierarchies and power structures. The other issue can be too that often, you know, if you ask the wrong question, you get the wrong answer. And if you actually ask a question of a more senior officer, they've got the context. They know a lot more about what's going on across the whole organisation, and they'll give you a much better answer to the question that you're asking, or maybe anticipate the complexity of the question. But, you know, the lower down the organisation you go, you'll ask a question and you probably won't actually get the right answer anyway. And it can end up causing a lot of difficulty and stress because the wrong information's out there. So there's a whole range of reasons why often the connection between the councillors and the officers is really at the executive level. Starts there, so that you get the right information that you need to make the decisions that you have to make.
Lucy, I was just going to say another part of it too is because it could be multiple times. Like we have a really good request system. We put in a request. Other councils are then aware of it because often a community person will come to one councillor, don't get the answer they want, they'll try someone else and someone else. They're all putting a request in the system. But if you're actually going to a staff member, like there's just repetitive things. It's just like you say, there's a power positioning thing, but also a duplication, multiple duplication. So it really, it's good to have a structure.
Okay, last question, and this one is from me. I'll be very transparent. Mendy and Marg, if somebody came to you in the street, or associate of yours, or indeed even one of the lovely women that we've got involved in this room tonight, and said to you, I'm thinking about running for councillor, what do you reckon? What would be the one piece of advice that you would give them?
I think it'd be be sure about why you want to do it. You know, like what motivates you to do it, because I think that will help you understand if you're going to enjoy it and be there for the reasons that you need to. Like, I'd certainly be really supportive of anyone who wanted to stand, but I've had those conversations with people about why do they want to stand? You know, what's the motivation? Because I think that actually then helps them answer their own question, really.
I think that's a great answer, Mark. Obviously, we're each driven by different things. We want to achieve different things, and I don't think the best reason to join council is because you want to make a difference in your community, I think. If you're doing it for other reasons, I don't know.
I've observed council, obviously, as we're all, obviously council watchers in many ways before becoming elected. I do find that people who stand for one particular reason, so, they just have one real reason why they want to stand because they're not happy about one particular thing. It often ends up not being very rewarding because they either don't get the success of what they wanted to overturn if they're elected, and then they haven't thought through why else they were there. So it could be an issue on just about waste, for instance, or something, but they haven't thought of anything broader, and it could be about an exemption on green bins, just as an example. If they haven't got a broader
just hypothetically, Mark.
Yeah, hypothetically. But there's lots of things. I'm not sure that might be, I don't know if that's an issue in your patch or not. Sorry, Karen, if it is or whatever. It was just an example. But that one item reason that people stand, and I know they're passionate maybe about that one thing, but if you get elected, you've got to be there's so much more. And if you don't get your way in that one thing, it's going to maybe make life a bit difficult because there's a lot of other things. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mendy. And thanks very much to the panel for answering all those questions. I really appreciate it. I'll hand back over to Deborah now to wrap us up, and then I'll do some final thanks at the end. Thank you. Thanks,
Karen. You are the most diligent timekeeper I've ever come across. Very good at doing that. And thank you to all our panel for all the insights that they've shared with us tonight. I think it's been really enjoyable. So we're back to Mentimeter now. I know some people had a little bit of trouble with it before, but if you hop onto menti.com and put in that code, you should be able to come up with this question, which is your key takeaway from this evening. And if you want to share that with us, and we've got some coming through already, that would be lovely. It's always really nice to see people's thoughts. We've got have a go, focus on the community. So many great women. There are so many great women. Know why you want to be a counsellor. Well done, brave women. Be clear on your why. I'm sure we've got more coming through as they come. I reconnected with the reason why I stood for council. That's really important. Bringing back democracy, very important in this current context. That diversity on council matters. It's really great stuff coming through. Very encouraged by the purpose of this session. The other thing that I did want to say, and as I was listening to to Karen, to Marg, to Mendy and Lucy speak is that we've been talking about a magic number in South Gippsland in some of the meetings that we've been having. So with 9 councillors, if we want to get to gender parity on council, we need either 4 or 5 women councillors to be elected. From the research that the VLGA has been doing, we know that approximately 1 in 3 women that run get elected. So our magic number for South Gippsland is 15. We want to see 15 of you running this year. And nominations will close in pretty much 1 month. So it's really great to see so many of you here tonight and so energized by the session. So what I'll do now is I'll move, why not 6, go for it. Yeah, we could always have 6 or more, that's there. But what I will do now is hand back to Karen and I'll get her to say a few words to finish off for the night.
Thanks so much, Deborah. So first of all, I'd like very sincerely to thank our panel members this evening, Marg, Mendy and Lucy, for so generously giving us your time and even more importantly, sharing so openly the benefit of your extensive experience, but also your personal reflections. It's been a really terrific learning experience to hear from you, and we really appreciate you supporting the return of local democracy in South Gippsland. So thank you so much. I'd also very much like to thank the Victorian Local Governance Association for supporting this event this evening, and also the state government for generously funding the event for us. In particular, in terms of the VLGA, I'd really like to thank Deborah for your hosting this evening, not only in terms of so capably leading us through all these online activities, but also helping to make it such an enjoyable event. So thank you so much, Deborah. And finally, and most importantly, I'd like to thank all of the participants this evening. We know that you could have certainly come up with other things to do with your Wednesday evening and you chose to spend it with us. So thank you so much for coming along and also for your active contribution. I very much hope that this has been a useful event for every one of you and that it's further piqued your interest in standing as a candidate in our council election later this year. And to those of you who do make the decision that you'd like to stand, I wish you all the very best for a very successful campaign. Thank you very much, everyone. I hope you've had a great night and I'd like to wish you a lovely evening and thanks for coming along.